Hello and welcome to Surrey Hills Community Radio with me, 4D. And that's my friend Anna Baker Cresswell. Which, if you would like to say hello, in fact, Anna, how are you?
Hello. Very, very nice of you to have me on your show.
Thank you. No, it's very nice to have you down. Like I say, I've said to the people that listen several times, I'm looking forward to getting some interviews going, because I think that's listening to my voice all the time gets very, very boring, I must admit. Sort of talking before we were on, before we went live there, that I think we met about 2011. That would
be about right, wouldn't it?
I'm now trying to think. I think it was a friend of a friend that put me in contact with you. I think a very, very good friend of mine, a squaddy, Speedy. She was up in Scotland.
That's right. That's who it was.
And she'd been along to an interview. Or you were doing a talk on horticultural therapy, I believe.
That's right, and she sent me an email. I do remember now, yeah.
I was extremely down, and Speedy, I think I've spoke about her before on the radio. She's a really, really good friend of mine. I know her from the army, and I don't think she'd seen me cry before or heard me cry, and I think I was in a really, really bad state, and I'd phoned her up, and I think halfway through the call I'd started crying or something, and she said, you know what, because back then we didn't realise that we knew that I was an alcoholic and a slight idiot, but we didn't know that there was any problem per se. And anyway, she put me into touch with you. Long story short was I got talking to you, and you said, "Hey, do you want to come down as a volunteer?" Anyway, I came along as a volunteer and started helping you with the guys, and it was brilliant. I learnt loads about this guys. I think through meeting you and then meeting the soldiers, I kind of started to realise that there were things going wrong with me, and then it was one of your staff that sort of took me to the side and said, you do realise the reason you're a good travel buddy is because you're suffering the same as the guys. So that's why I hold a lot of respect for you and what was going on before that, because I didn't know anything about mental health and PTSD. And we kind of, so I was there for some time, you were we've both moved on from there, and we've got new things going on. I'm here in the studio, and you now, in fact, tell the listeners what HighGround is all about.
Well, here's the thing. So in March 2013, I started HighGround, and HighGround's a charity, and we use the green environment to help improve the well-being and employment prospects of those who've served their country in the military. It's the child, if you like, of what I did before.
So what you learnt in your previous engagements was you threw it all together in a mixing bowl, and this is what you've got with HighGround.
Absolutely right.
And HighGround has been around since 2013, March 2013,
that's
wasn't it?
That's right. Yes, that's right. So you see, horticultural therapy. When my mother had Parkinson's, and she died in 2004, and I wanted to do something in her memory. She was a great gardener.
I see.
And she was also what they call a Nightingale nurse. So that means she trained at St Thomas's Hospital in London.
Okay.
So she was a proper people person, and as I say, she was a much better gardener than I'll ever be. And it meant a lot to me to be able to do something in her memory. And that's why I started the first charity. And the premise of it was to see whether horticultural therapy would work for the military, because I knew that it had been used since Vietnam by the Americans.
The Americans.
But we hadn't really quite got there in this country, so I thought to myself, I have nothing to lose, but let's just see whether it'll work. So this is now my 10th year with working with horticultural therapy and the military, so it's a very proud moment for me to be sitting here having set up a project at the service at Headley Court, and here we are 10 years on.
Yeah, so Headley Court means a lot to me too, because I spent some time in Headley Court, and this weekend I was racking my brain trying to remember when it was. I think it was about 2001. Yeah, so I went into Headley Court after I had an accident in the Falkland Islands. The side of a truck fell on me and kind of put me in traction. I was in a bad way. And without Headley Court, there's no way I would have got back up on my feet. But yeah, I want to sort of go back. You've been 10 years now, sort of in this field. Why horticulture? Why did you decide to Were you looking at what Americans were doing, or what made you decide horticultural therapy and soldiers, this might work together?
Because we have, I looked after her for the last couple of years of her life, and we have a walled garden at home, and it meant a lot to me that I could spend time in the walled garden when I wasn't caring for her. And coupled with that, I had a great friend who went to the Falklands during the Falklands conflict. He did come home, but he didn't come home the same person. And I was young and naive, and I think it just bugged me. I really do. I think the fact that I couldn't work out why he was different really got me. And in the end, when I started the first charity 10 years ago, the premise was simple. It was horticultural therapy for veterans in walled gardens. And the walled garden is important.
Yes.
Because I don't know if your listener, I don't know if you've ever talked to your listeners about hypervigilance.
Not really, actually, no.
So here's the thing. There's lots of evidence to show, lots of research to show that until you're relaxed and you're comfortable in your environment, you will never benefit from any intervention, whether it's going to the hairdresser or whether it's physiotherapy or whatever it is.
That's interesting. Yeah, I can see.
And therefore, if you're in a walled garden and it's only got the walled gardens rarely have more than 2 doors, you can see. You've got a clear view and you know exactly what's around you. And one of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder is what they call hypervigilance, which means people are constantly looking over their shoulder and they're looking around for threats.
Yes, yeah.
And so that was really my idea of putting people into an area or an environment where they'd feel safe. Because then the whole point of being in the garden and being outdoors, they could start to benefit from it.
Americans have been doing it since sort of Vietnam.
Since Vietnam, yes.
Time. Why do you think it is no one looked at it over here then?
America, most of the states in America still use horticultural therapy to great effect. I think one of the reasons why, although they in this country after the war there were lots of farms and market gardens that were used during patient rehabilitation, but then the health and safety culture kicked in, and I think during the 70s and the 80s, most of these the places where the almost like a sanatoria, if you will, were closed off and they were sold. So by the time I arrived with my idea, which was fairly new, fairly novel, I think the stiff upper lip nature of what our society in England is meant that the Americans are much more, I would hesitate to use the word confessional, but at the moment I can't find another one. Their PTSD is part of life, where we have only just started in the last maybe 5 or 6 years. This is a personal opinion, to actually talk about these things, because when you think people came back from the Falklands, they were just expected to just rejoin life.
Get on,
just get on with it. And even Iraq, really.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think it's pretty new that we're now able to talk about not just physical health, but mental health as well. And I think people, certainly Prince Harry has done an awful lot to help.
Yes.
I think, as you say, the internet's helped. I think culturally we are changing and we are becoming more easy with ourselves. It's such a normal activity.
Yeah.
And if we can have a common language, it's not the language of mental health. It's the language of, the pesky caterpillars, or, because our turnips won't germinate, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's a common language that bonds people together. So they don't have to talk about, are you having a bad day? Because the gardening is there as the language that draws them together.
Yeah, and I found when I was going there, the garden became your soundboard. If you really had a bad day, you pick up a spade and you dig a hole in 0.5 seconds, because
Absolutely.
You know, my grandparents were very clever people, and they gardened all their lives. I think during the Second World War, everyone came together, you know, to there wasn't enough money, and
oh, definitely, dig for victory.
Dig for victory, and how much of an effect that, probably without them knowing, had an effect on the community and the community spirit. We're just so busy, we're so...
Aren't we? So frenetic.
Rushed.
Yeah.
Yes, it's all very, very interesting. And in fact, I tell you what, we've been talking for some time now. We're going to go to a song, and I'm going to play this one for Anna, and we'll come back after this song. Thanks very much. That was a brilliant song. I'm glad I got to hear that. Where are you with HighGround at the moment? Because obviously I met you back in 2011. Lots and lots has changed. Where are you, and what's going on with HighGround at the moment?
So, here we are, at Headley. Well, I'm now working at Headley Court, and I'm very proud that several years ago I was invited to visit Headley Court by the then commanding officer, and at the time I was explaining to him what I was doing with the Horticultural Therapy project that I was running then, and he said, oh, it'd be a good idea if we had something like that here for our patients. And lo and behold, here we are in 2017, and we have just finished a 3-year pilot to see whether horticultural therapy could be part of the rehabilitation interventions for injured serving personnel at Headley Court.
So actually integrating it with what they were already doing at Headley Court.
Exactly.
Oh, brilliant!
Exactly,
so like a bolt-on, brilliant. Yeah.
Exactly right. So now they can have the hydrotherapy, the physio, the occupational therapy, the speech therapy, and also, if their occupational therapist deems that they need it and it would be beneficial to them, they can be referred to horticultural therapy. No, you wouldn't recognise the gardens now. They're absolutely fantastic, and I have to say that we've taken over both the greenhouses, the garden areas. We built our nod to 1418 commemoration is called. We built a new garden called Home Thoughts from Abroad.
Okay.
And the patients designed it and helped to build it. And the point of the garden was we didn't want another memorial. So Carol, who's our horticultural therapist, she asked her patients, when they're deployed abroad, what do they think about when they think about their gardens? And lots of them came back and said it's got to have a shed, and they said a picket fence, so it's got a little white picket fence around it, and they said bluebells and apples and all sorts of and sweet peas. So that's our, as I say, that's our nod to 1418, and it's a lovely, lovely garden.
And it's all all forces incorporated in what you do.
Yes, that's right. So Headley Court is the only place where it's tri-service. So if you're unfortunate enough to be injured, it doesn't matter whether you're Army, Navy, Royal Marines, RAF, everybody goes there.
Why are you still... What is it that keeps you going?
That's a very good question. I think my motivation is if we can help to improve the lives of injured patients and the difference that it can, that the horticultural therapy, just being in a garden and doing something purposeful, to me what makes the garden so precious is that it gives people back hope, but it does it through curiosity. Because if you think about it, if you sow a seed, there is something, and one of the symptoms of PTSD is what they call a sense of foreshortened future. And what that really means in layman's terms is people, they're struggling so much to get to the end of the day, they're not really able to project forwards. But the very act of sowing a seed, there is some kind of curiosity that thinks, I wonder what it'll be like, I wonder if it'll come up. And therefore, because the gardening year never really ends, if you think about it, it just keeps trundling along. There is such a sense of, it can give people back that sense of, I need to keep going. I really do need to keep going. It's very powerful.
It is. Again, you said there about there's not an end in the garden either, which is great when you've seen some things or experienced some things that have given you PTSD that are all about endings. If a plant doesn't bloom, you get the ground ready for the next year, and they're going to come, they're going to die, and they're going to come back again. Of course they will. And it's so there's a lovely regeneration. There's a lovely spiritual thing about the fact that it's all just coming up, regrowing, and how much healthier just from it having one bowl of potatoes that you've grown. I remember whatever we were growing would be given out to the guys and girls that came, but also every day that we were there, I think it was a Wednesday, I forget now, it really is irrelevant, Wednesday afternoon, whatever we picked in the garden would get thrown in a big pot, a couple of sauces and spices thrown in, and everyone would just dig in and have some soup, and it was great.
Yeah,
and I remember there was guys there that wouldn't have had a cooked meal all week until they came there, and again, that's another tiny aspect of what the garden can offer.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And I also think that the act of sharing food is an extraordinary thing. You know, so
True.
often people suffering with mental health difficulties, they isolate themselves.
Yes.
And they live on their own. So the very fact that they're able to come to somewhere where they feel safe and share something, share food, is... and also, another thing I've noticed about the Horticultural Therapy service at Headley Court is we can help people to re-engage with their families, and especially their children. So if you've got daddy who's always been fit and busy and rushing around, and then he gets injured, and then he's a bit grumpy, and he can't move very far, and you certainly can't kick a football with him. What can you do with him? Or what can he do with you? What kind of activity? And we spent a lot of time teaching people, or helping them learn. You can't really teach military people, but they learn, not through teaching, how to garden. Yeah. And gardening is something that, if they can share that with their children, it's a very, very powerful thing. Yeah,
I kind of forget that there's no we laughed, you can't retrain a soldier, but actually there's no training involved. It's just, right, there's the garden, get out there, let's pick some weeds or dig a hole.
Exactly.
And little 5-year-old Tommy can do that with his 49-year-old dad who can't move his arm and his leg. Yeah. And I hadn't looked at it like that. It's brilliant. I've got just a song we should play now, so we're going to put on a song and we're going to come back. And what I want to talk about is how myself and the listeners can get to know HighGround more and what we can do. And so we'll play this and we'll come back and we'll talk about some stuff like that.
So the late Duke of Westminster, who'd spent some of his happiest times in the army, several years ago, he was asking what he could do for the military and for his country. And somebody suggested that because Headley Court is in a very built-up area, and the planning is so difficult around here, as you well know, and so will your listeners, that something that the Duke could do is to make a new Headley Court. And miraculously, although it's tragic that he's not there to see it, because he died last year, but his vision, his magnificent vision, will come to fruition next year. So he bought an estate near Loughborough, which is in the Midlands, and the reason for it is he wanted it to be close to Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and he also wanted it to be more easily accessible for families coming to visit their loved ones when they were patients during their rehabilitation. So that's how it ended up at Stanford Hall, which is a £300 million project. It's the most expensive philanthropic project of its type in the world. Oh, wow. And it's going to be pretty amazing.
And what about size is it bigger than the grounds that we have here, smaller, around about the same?
It's a bigger site. It's an altogether bigger site. The ambition at the moment is replication. So it's going to be called the DNRC, the Defence National Rehabilitation Centre.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that not only will they effectively pick up Headley Court and move it there from a numbers point of view, but there is an ambition that not only will it be the best rehabilitation for military personnel, but that rehabilitation for civilians can also take place there.
But that's all well and good going up to Stanford Hall. That's quite logistically. That's quite a pricey and hard job. Is it going to be easy for HighGround to get up there?
Well, the short answer to your question is no. The Surgeon General, whilst he thinks that horticultural therapy is a great intervention, he's very happy that it's part of the rehab interventions. As we all know, that the country's short of money, And
Indeed.
the military is experiencing swinging cuts at the moment. So if we are to continue, we have to raise all the money ourselves. Now, next year is going to be a very expensive year for HighGround, because not only do we have staff to keep going at Headley Court, but my staff at Headley Court are not going to move with us. So I have to recruit and train new staff to take over the project once we get going at Stanford Hall. So next year is going to be pretty expensive.
And horticultural therapists, if I remember rightly, don't grow on trees. They're very few and far between.
That's a fantastic line, and it's also sadly true.
Yeah. I remember having a conversation with you many, many years ago about finding a horticultural therapist.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, Carol, who's our wonderful horticultural therapist at Headley Court, when I found her, she was working in a prison. She was actually teaching horticulture to prisoners.
Oh, wow, right.
So you're right. They're there, but they're not that accessible, if you like. So finding the next one, finding any one could never really replicate Carol, but
sure, yeah.
Finding her replacement will be challenging.
So yeah, so it's not I suppose what I'm saying is it's not just money. There's a lot of things to think about.
For sure.
But how does a charity? Because obviously HighGround is a charity. How are you going to go around to get the collateral to move up there, basically?
So we're a charity, and we rely we don't get any statutory funding at the moment. So we rely entirely on grant-making trusts and foundations and public donation. So if you can imagine a bucket that at the moment is empty, I worked out using the costings from the 3-year pilot that it's going to cost us £354,000 to deliver the horticultural therapy service for the next 3 years.
That's a lot of money, yeah.
It sure is.
Does that keep you? That must keep you up at night.
It certainly does, Ian, and you're not wrong.
How can I force them to get some money out of their wallets, or how do we go about making sure that HighGround does go up there and does carry on the good work?
Well, you're very kind, Ian. I think the important thing to remember is every single penny that gets put into that bucket that helps us to to reach our target is important. So it costs us as a charity £92 to deliver one session of horticultural therapy, which is it's a lot of money, but these are very skilled people, and I would urge anyone who feels strongly, or even who has enjoyed and appreciated the great outdoors and felt some therapeutic benefit. You have to remember, or I would like people to remember, that the people who we deliver horticultural therapy to, they've served their country. They've jolly well done their bit.
We had an open day on Saturday of last, and I was talking to someone that had come in that was going to possibly be a DJ, and I happened to mention Headley Court. Now, Headley Court's been there since about 1899. In fact, I think the central mansion was built in 1899. So it's a huge plot of land. And the person I was speaking to was in his late 30s and had been here all his life, had never heard of Headley Court, didn't even know it was there. So even just saying to people that there's a military establishment down there, and if that doesn't interest you, Linda Lusardi lives round the road from the hospital. I mean, good grief. Yeah, I really hope that I hope we get some listeners going on to your website, onto the HighGround website, which I will put all the details up on the Facebook page, so you can go to that. But actually, over the airwaves, what is your email? Or how do people contact you at HighGround?
The best thing to do is go through the website. And,
okay, cool.
But you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at HighGroundBoss, and other than that, Facebook is great. Everybody uses Facebook.
Facebook is a great one, and I know that I've got HighGround on my Facebook, and I think it's been transferred across to the Surrey Hills Facebook page. So, guys, you know, it won't be hard. I will pin it to the top of my page. Get on there, have a look, just to sort of educate yourselves about what goes on down at, or what has gone on down at Headley Court since 1899. and find out, you know, read a couple of stories from a couple of guys and girls that have been to Headley Court, and you'll realise what an amazing establishment it is. And then make sure you go over to the HighGround website and read. I think, if I'm right in saying that you've got some testimony, like one-line testimonials there. Have a read, and if you know, if you don't realise that it's doing a good thing, then you'll never realise. If you're, it's coming up to Christmas. Hey, what a great time to put some money into a bucket and help some ex-soldiers that, from all ages, males and females. It's not PTSD and these mental health issues aren't sexist, racist. They go to us all. So maybe there's a good idea. It's a good way of putting £50 for, you know, instead of spending something at Christmas for someone, put £50 in a. I'll start again because I've gone completely mental. Put £50 in a bucket in a. What's wrong with me, Anna? I was going to say I'm going to pause and cut this out, but I'm not. I'm going to carry on because everyone knows what I'm like, so it doesn't matter. I was going to say in an that's what I was trying to. It was the word imaginary that was escaping me. Put your £50 in an imaginary bucket, get it across to HighGround, and let's make sure that horticultural therapy isn't just an American thing. What I want to do is I literally just want to get the word out there to people. I want you to know what's going on at Headley Court, what has gone on at Headley Court, what goes on at HighGround, and from a personal point of view, from a soldier's point of view, from someone that does suffer, as you know, with all these sort of mental health issues, it was my saviour, and it got me from the streets to this lovely warm studio that I'm sat in today. And I'd love to get some more of your help.